Fletcher. Now sit back and prepare to be entertained. Welcome to the Dripping Bucket Podcast with your hosts, Krystle Matar and Michael R Fletcher, me. And we are joined today by Holly Tinsley, author of Women of Ash and Shadow, an SPFBO finalist from 2021. Did I get the year right?
Cycle 7, yeah.
Yes. And so Holly's joining us today to talk about things and stuff. How you doing, Holly?
I'm doing good. Thank you very much for having me. I love this. I feel like I've been invited to hang out with the cool kids in school.
Well, you got the special SPFBO 7 finalist treatment, so it feels like we're having a slow reunion because we talked to Clayton, we talked to Ben, we're going to talk to Tim as well. Although I guess his episodes will be airing before yours. Anyway, we're time traveling through the whole crew.
Just slowly ticking us off the list one by one.
Yeah, exactly. One assassination at a time.
I was going to say, it sounds more like a hit list, but I've spoken to a few of them since I think you spoke to them, so I'm pretty sure they're alive.
Pretty sure. They could be the automatons that we unleashed.
This got dark real quick.
Yeah. Fitting.
I mean, we're all grimdark authors, right? So it suits.
Yeah,
What?
exactly.
No, I only write cozy fantasy. No idea what you're talking about.
So speaking of We Men of Ash and Shadow, I thought it would be a good time to kind of introduce everybody to you, since SPFBO 7 was a few years ago, and everybody's paying attention to the new SPFBO kids now. Did you want to? Where did my mind go? Did you want to kind of tell us a bit about how We Men came together and, that journey for you and how you ended up in indie specifically?
Yeah, I mean, I've got to cast my mind back now because it feels like it was a lot longer than it was. I mean, it was, 2018, I think. So I'm pretty sure that, kingdoms have risen and fallen since then. But
That's true.
in terms of where it started, I mean, I consider myself an accidental grimdark author. So I know a few people in the same boat who wrote a book and put it out there and then were told, this is grimdark. So
it's not that dark, is it? Yeah, you literally murder everybody. It's dark.
I mean, I don't think it's that dark, but it's all a matter of perspective, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah.
But, I mean, I kind of started looking into what grimdark was, and I started following grimdark Facebook groups and kind of book communities. I started realising that some of the books I'd read were grimdark, and I'd not actually realised it. So I never set out with the intention to write a dark book. What I originally wanted to write was a low fantasy, and I knew I wanted to write something that was city-based, because as much as I love reading world building, I like to keep my writing small scale. I think someone referred to it the other day as street level, and I really like that way of looking at it. So Vanguard is an assassin mercenary. I'm never quite sure what the right term is, but he basically kills people for a very small amount of money.
But it's not that dark.
It's not that dark. He kills them very gently. It's all very respectful. But yeah, his whole journey is through this dark city where it's run by a sort of corrupt overlord who governs it like a city-state and is embroiled in crime and corruption, and from the top level of the people who are aristocratic and politicians and merchants right down to the very bottom rung of the social ladder. And he starts to really, I don't know if he questions his motives, but I think he kind of gets fed up of what he's doing. I don't think he wants to do it anymore. So yeah, he kind of gets involved with a group of people who are looking to change things and stir up a bit of revolution, maybe. And yeah, that's pretty much what I wanted it to be.
Yeah. So what kind of what books did you sort of start reading as a kid? Like, what got you into fantasy? How did you end up at We Men of Ash and Shadow? What sort of led you there?
Okay, now I am convinced that the books I read as a child are very much responsible for the books I now write as an adult.
Yeah, I feel that.
There's a particular author that I think I mention quite a lot, but not many people have actually heard of him. It's a UK author called Robin Jarvis, who wrote books for kind of I say young adult, but it was probably more around the 10 to 14 age category. And his books were dark. I mean, there are some messed up kids out there because of these books, but they were also brilliant. I mean, they were absolutely genius. My favourite book that he did was called The Alchemist's Cat. And if you ever get a chance to read it, I mean, I would recommend it even now. It was the darkest, most miserable book, but it was so genuine and honest. So this book follows this young protagonist who his whole family ends up getting killed. Like, that's literally the first page. He goes to London, meets up with this person who's supposed to care for him. They are also killed. I mean, this isn't even spoilers. This is just the intro.
Just the setup.
This book's got it's got death, it's got murder. It's set against the backdrop of the plague. So, you know, what's going on.
No wonder you don't think We Men is that dark.
I know,
There's
right?
no plague in it.
What were my parents thinking buying me this book? Just they've got a lot to answer for.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was amazing, and the characters in it were so vivid and so real, and the way that they approached and handled subjects like death and grief and loss was so open and honest. And as a child who was very curious and kind of wanted to know about things from like almost a scientific, more like an analytical point of view, it was very well set up for that. So yeah, I mean, I still have a copy to this day.
Yeah, I could definitely see how that would lead to being an accidental grimdark writer. And I feel like accidental grimdark writer is going to be something that we hit a lot as we talk to guests. Like, so many of the people that we come on going, oh yeah, he's absolutely writing grimdark, or she's absolutely writing grimdark, come on and admit, I didn't know. I had no idea. Even Fletcher, like...
I'd never heard of grimdark when Beyond Redemption came out. I had no idea.
Yeah, it's just this funny little genre that like captures us somewhere along the way, and then, you know, it lays claim to us whether we know what we're doing or not. And I find that really relatable anyway, just that, you know, something left such a strong root in you, and then it led to kind of an inevitable taste in media that was only revealed to you later as grimdark. And I know we share an influence, at least, in Gangs of New York. And so I'm curious, like, how, not just in books, but like if you find that same thing where you're drawn to these stories that are really chaotic and messy and dark, but also really human. Like, I really like Scorsese's movies because they're really uncomfortable, but always on purpose. And I wonder if there's a lot of overlap for you in that general.
I mean, yeah, definitely. I think I probably draw more inspiration from video games, TV, movies than they do from books. The books I tend to read are actually quite different to what I write. At least they are now. So, I mean, yeah, Gangs of New York is a really good example. The one I always like when I talk about We Men is Luther. I don't know if you've seen that show.
Oh, I've heard of it. Yeah.
Yeah, that
putting
was
that on my to-watch list.
You will love it. It's so good. I mean, you can't go wrong with Idris Elba, let's face it. But
it's true.
If you watch, I think if you watch it now, having read We Men, I think you'll probably see some of the parallel. Even though obviously Luther's modern day setting, I think the kind of vibe and the tone of it, and especially his relationship with some of the other characters, I think a lot of that influenced how I built Vanguard's relationship with people, especially with Carmen. I mean, the bathtub scene in the first Vanguard book is almost like my little tribute to Luther's relationship with a prostitute that he meets. And it's obviously it's a very different scenario, but it's just that kind of feeling of opening up to somebody and being vulnerable with them, but at the same time still keeping that distance.
Kind of being on
really
guard still.
I'm trying to have a think now because it's been so long. I can hardly remember the book, let alone what influenced it.
Well, but then if you've got this new one coming out, which is the real reason we have you here, the Hallows, and just your tagline is just so you. Oh darn! I closed the window. But your tagline of illicit substances. What was the
ancient bloodlines, illicit substances,
and
floating nuns.
we were looking at it before you came on, and just like, yeah, I'm so sold. I'm so incredibly sold. Like, so then, how did you spring off of Vanguard and into the new idea? Was it on an on purpose break, or was it kind of just to spare yourself?
Just to kind of backpedal a little bit there, just to the tagline. Okay. I will say I really owe a lot to some of my beta readers who had an early copy of the book, because originally I had put the cover out to them without a tagline, and it was in the book, kind of as you open it, like in the credits or acknowledgements, whatever that page is called. And they said, look, you have to put this on the cover. Like, you've got to put... So I was like, okay, I'll put it on the cover. And like, literally the one thing everyone has honed in on is the floating nuns.
Well, it's so brilliant. It sets such an interesting tone, because like the ancient bloodlines and the it's like you start with the most common fantasy thing, the ancient bloodlines, where it's like we can all think of like a billion stories, and then illicit substances. Oh, you've got my interest now. Like, fantasy doesn't always deal with intoxicants quite as much, and then floating nuns. It's like, excuse me, what? And you just lead us down this incredible journey of vibes in those three lines. It was really brilliantly done.
I'm just taking you from you know where you are to you haven't got a clue where we're going.
Exactly, like, exactly, and that's why I want
it. Sorry, I was like completely sidetracked you there, but to go back to your question about why the Hallows. I mean, I wanted to write something standalone anyway. That was always kind of in the cards for me. And obviously I've been working on Vanguard for several years now, and I kind of got to the point where the first book came out and then the second book came out, and at that time it was during the SPFBO, so I was kind of riding that wave still. And it got to the point where once that had finished and I was thinking, okay, I'm going to sit down and write the third book, it was just like a wall came up, and it just absolutely threw me. And like, I could see, like, from your expressions that you've absolutely had this before. You know, it was like being thrown out of a moving car, and I just realised 4 years of my life have gone past, you know, and I basically needed to take time to reset, reevaluate. And also I kind of changed, like, who I was and how I wrote has changed since the first book. And I've got to try and relearn a lot of the stuff that I did first time round. So I thought, I'm going to do standalone. I'm going to just put down some ideas, see what happens. And I'd had this character, Cam, who is the main character in the Hallows, in my head for a while. He'd been used in a short story, which was in the Skybreaker anthology.
Okay, I remember when that came out.
So I kind of plucked him out, you know, and just kind of put him in a story to see where he would go. And the whole process was actually really good for me. It was really cathartic. I stepped back from social media. I stepped back from, you know, a lot of my engagement, which may have not been a good idea in the long run, but at the time was, you know, what I needed to do. So it was a good experience.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those things. Yeah,
you wrote an entire book to avoid writing a book.
Yes,
I can so relate. I'm currently editing the book I wrote to avoid writing a different book.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then you also spearheaded an entire anthology to avoid writing another book. Did you want to talk about Anatomy of... I'm such a bad host. I should have had it out because I have my copyright over there. But yeah, Anatomy of...
I have a book.
Yay!
First time it's ever happened. So yes, there it is. That's the Pebble Kickstarter version. So, yeah, this was a project that sort of ran away from me, as I'm sure Krystle will attest.
Yeah. Oh, it was so much. Well, I mean, I say it was so much fun because I didn't do very much. So, on the other hand, you did a lot, and I bet it wasn't as much fun for you as it was for me.
I mean, it had its moments. I'm not gonna lie. It was great fun for 90% of it, and the fun came out of getting to work with all the authors. So obviously there was Krystle, Tim, Jacob, Trudy, a lot of people I knew already, but then there were people who were kind of new, so like Zamil, I hadn't really spoken to before. I didn't even think he would be in it. I remember like literally my finger was shaking as I was typing out this message, being like, "Do you want to be in my book?" But yeah, it was great. It was so many people came on board so fast. I remember we had a list of about 25 authors that we wanted to go out to. And I thought, well, you know, not everyone that we go out to is going to say yes. So we'll go out to, you know, the first 12 and then we'll start running through the next. And I think within about 2 hours, everyone in the 12 had come back and said, yes, we're on board. And I think at that point, I thought I was going to have more time to plan. And everyone's just like, right, let's go, let's do it.
Yeah. Well, you put together such a gorgeous pitch. Like just talking about the very first thing that you sent me. Like you had like a mock-up done of the kind of art that you wanted to see and the vibes that you had, and it was just like, oh my god, yes! Like I need this to exist, and I selfishly need to exist in it because it was such a gorgeous idea. And so that I find that probably pivots well into talking about influences, because it's not only fantasy. This anthology is fantasy and horror, and how the genres overlap. And I'm curious how that came about for you in your mind, where you wanted a fantasy horror anthology when they're not necessarily always shelved together. It's not like fantasy and science fiction that are always like in the exact same spot in the bookstore. Fantasy and horror kind of have a bit more separation, which now that I think about it is really odd because they do have a lot in common. So anyway, where did you come up with the idea of a fantasy horror anthology?
The idea actually originally came from, I was talking to P.L. Stewart, and we'd kind of run this idea of doing an anthology past each other. And we were kind of talking about different genres and which kind of routes we wanted to go down. We knew it was always going to be fantasy, but we wanted to do fantasy with a bit of a twist. So the reason that we chose horror was because, like Grimdark, I mean, I think Grimdark is very much about the analysis, like say, kind of human emotions and society. And I wanted to do horror where it was looked at from a perspective of the emotions of it, like how does it make us feel. So the intention was not so much to make people scared reading the book, but to make them understand or empathize with fear, or to link it back to their own experiences. And I think some of the stories, I mean, Ella McCrae's Story Bone.
Oh God, it was so good.
Will resonate with so many people, that kind of childhood fear. I mean, she smashed it out of the park, really did.
And she was so nervous too. And I mean, shout out to her for what she accomplished, because she was like, I'm out of my depth, I don't feel like I belong. And then she came up with that story, and it broke me so skillfully, and I'm so impressed with what she did, considering she was outside of her comfort zone, which I think is interesting about horror. Like, it can push us to things that are so resonant, even when we, the writers, are uncomfortable. Maybe especially because we, the writers, are uncomfortable.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, I do remember having that conversation with her and saying, you know, I'm doing this anthology, would you be interested? And she came back to me and said, you know, I'd be happy to be in it, but, you know, it's not my comfort zone. I don't know if I can do this. And I was like, no, you absolutely can. I've seen the writing that you do. I know that you've got this in you. And, you know, she did, and it was great. I mean, all the stories were fantastic. Some people obviously already in the horror genre, so like Lee, C. Connolly, and Zamil, they were very much in their comfort zone.
Yeah, Ryan's too. I remember Ryan's being deeply creepy. That's Ryan House. His was really good. Anyway, I'm just going to talk about how good everybody else is, but we're supposed to. but so you, from an organizing standpoint, you had to wear a lot of hats for that anthology.
Yeah, a lot more than I thought. I mean, I was probably a little bit naive going into this, and I did actually have a lot of help from people behind the scenes. So everybody chipped in their own way with whatever they could contribute. But it was really myself, Lee, Jacob, and Tim that were like the production team, doing the Kickstarter, doing all the marketing, and that was full time, pretty much for a year. I mean, you just don't think it's going to be that much work. You think with 12 people, it's going to be much easier than doing your own book.
I think it makes it harder. Actually, having now been in 2 anthologies, I think that other people make it hard because we can kick our own asses pretty easily. I think as writers, we're pretty driven. But then it gets harder to like tell other people, listen, I have a deadline and you have to meet it. And it's just like, and you were so kind to us. You were probably way too kind to those of us that were dragging our asses.
I mean, I don't remember any of you being that bad.
Okay.
People were pretty responsive. I think the difficult bits came from like the artwork and the Kickstarter, because obviously we kind of ran through quite a few artists, and I don't think we got done until really the 11th hour she came in. So yeah, that was a lot of stress. But I mean, you guys were fine. You no stress.
Phew, that's very nice of you to say. I think we can. A lot of us. Oh,
so I would just say, except when it came to word count, that is the only thing. I
knew it. I knew it was going to be in trouble.
Oh, Krystle with a word
Fletcher.
count problem, eh?
It was Fletcher for sure. Listen, I figured a lot of people were under, so I just ate up the budget that you gave to them, right?
You know, it actually went really well because you went slap bang in the centre of the book. So you actually, it just fit really nicely.
Yeah, see, I wasn't difficult, I was a visionary. I was just going to say, though, that like I think in publishing in general, a lot of us can relate to that feeling of I was optimistic and naive about this process. And I guess linking it back to We Men, you said 2018, is that right? That you published?
Yes. I think
yeah.
So, yeah. I think so.
Oh, you know what? I have it right here. I can't
even remember when I published my own book.
Listen, I can't remember either. Oh, it in the book it says 2020. So
I think I started writing it 2018.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So then I guess kind of as a parting thought, if there was anything that you wish you could have told 2018 and 2020 Holly about what this journey was going to be like, to have, you know, just to brace yourself a bit for it, what do you think you would tell her, other than the fact that 2023, 2024 Holly is great and it's doing awesome?
That is a loaded question.
Yeah, sorry to drop that on you, but I just...
I think... I mean, first of all, I would probably not tell myself everything, because I think if I did, I probably wouldn't do it. But I think the main thing I would tell myself is just to try and be as engaged with the community as you can, and not just because it is good for you as a writer, but because it is good for you as a person.
Yeah.
So last year when I hit that wall, it devastated me. It was the first time I'd ever experienced it, and I was like, this is it, career's over, never going to write another book in my life. It was just doom for about 8-9 months, and I could not get out of it. And the only reason I started to come out of it was because of the people that I engaged with, who said, you know what, actually, I felt like this last year, or I felt like this after my 3rd book, 4th book, whatever. So yeah, A, those experiences happen to everybody, and B, that community will get you through that experience. And that would be it.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. At least about yeah. I mean, at both points where yeah, we all go through it. You could probably see the PTSD behind our eyes when you said you hit your wall. And yeah, the community is great and I feel like yeah, you nailed it. So there you go. I put you on the spot, but it was a great answer. Good timing, bud.
I might be slightly dying. All right, so what are we at? We're
Yeah.
at about 25 minutes. Let's wrap this
That
one
wraps
up.
us really well. Yeah.
Join us next week, folks, when we discuss how writers age at about the same age as dogs. And 1 year between books is equal to about 7 regular human years.
Yeah. And that's
alrighty.
why we all look so tired all the time.
Yeah. And thank you for joining us, Holly.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
All righty.
Thanks, everybody.
We'll see you later.
Yeah.